This is a Dallas Willard quote. The truth spoken without love is always going to be brutal. What he means by that really is the Christian conception of love, meaning actively working for and hoping for the good of the other. So if you speak the truth without that, it's going to be brutal. And I have suffered with that consistently around these kinds of phone calls and also indulging in it myself. So I have been the victim of and the perpetrator, sometimes on the same show.
This is the Act One podcast. I'm your host, James Duke. Thanks for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave us a good review. Today's podcast is a special one. It's another sneak peek. Instead of a typical interview with a filmmaker, this episode features a panel discussion we had for a class back in November for our producing students on how to give notes to screenwriters. Our panelists are Owen Shiflett, Clare Sera, and Quinton Peeples. I hope you enjoyed this little sneak peek of our Act One Producing and Entertainment Executive Program.
It's good to see everyone, and I'm so glad that we could meet tonight. We're really excited about this class. This is our first panel conversation. We're going to have a couple of these. So this is a conversation that I think is a good conversation for us to have for aspiring producers and creative executives, and that is the relationship between producer and writer, the relationship between executive and writer. When it comes to working in the business, as we all know, what we've often said, if you want to just go write and not have anyone saying go write novels, right? But if you are okay with writing in a system where lots of people get their hands on your projects and give feedback, then that's what writing screenplays is for film and television. And so what we have here today is a panel full of people who have sat on both sides of that table as writers who have sat through lots and lots of note sessions, whether it be with producers or studios or showrunners, and as well as people who've had to give those notes, who have had to read scripts, who have had to help writers kind of shape or reshape a project. So that's the kind of the reason why we're talking tonight. So I'm grateful for all of you guys for being a part. I want to start off with kind of a big question, just kind of right off the bat. Clare and Quinton, you guys are kind of representing my writers, although I know, Quinton, you've done a lot of producing as well in television. And so I'll ask you guys this question first. What's like the best note you were ever given as a writer? And what was possibly the worst note you were ever given by a writer? And Clare, ladies first, would you like to go first?
I'm no lady. Yeah. Worst note. My long answer for this is when someone reads the script without context of where the script is sitting, or where the writer is in the process. So truly the worst note I think I ever got was on a project for Sony, and it was a family film, which I was writing quite a few of those back in the day. And the executive said, this would be a better rom-com. So
Okay.
Wait, I don't understand that. Why was that bad?
Owen's asking, that seems like a legitimate note to Owen.
Because the thing that drives me the craziest as a writer is when the executive or the producer, whoever the reader is not reading the script for what it is and is not reading it within context. It's like, you hired me to write it. I pitched you a family film. You hired me to write a family film. We talked tone. I mean, this didn't come out of the blue. We talked tone, we talked outline, and I have delivered you a family film. And the executive was not interested in family films. is really what the issue was. They wanted to do rom-coms. That's fine, but the project they were on was not a rom-com. That's not, I had not been hired to write that. And I love rom-coms. But and it meant that they were not seeing the project, and they were also not seeing all the work that I had done. Like, they just ignored everything that had been done. Now, if they had come and said, you know what, this relationship, this character is really interesting, and this, secondary character over here in this B story has kind of caught my attention. What do you think if a relationship is there? If they had talked with me from where my script was, they could have moved me to that place, and I could have been excited to explore the rom-com aspect. So it wasn't even that the note was horrible. It was that it was out of context. It put me on guard and defensive, and I didn't know how to respond to it, except with that blank stare that we writers get sometimes faced with an executive. And I'm sure you will all experience it sometime. Our eyes just go back, they roll back like a shark back into the back of our skull. It's like, I'm not here anymore. Because I just think it's so important to read the actual script, have your thoughts, let the writer know you read the script, you read the work that they did, you see what's there, and then you can talk, about what's right or wrong, about it. That's why it was a bad note to me. I don't know if they properly even read it.
Yeah, and I that's a fear that I think you're validating the fear of a lot of people, right? Like, did you actually read the script that I gave you, right? Quinton, do you have a
well, I'm going to dovetail on what Claire said, because when she used the word context, it's super important, because what she's addressed both globally and specifically is there is this constant question that lies around the notes process, which is, are we making the same movie?
Yes.
Are we making the same television show? Every single notes session you will go through will have that underneath.
Yeah.
It's an assessment of, are we on the same page on this? Do we see this the same way? In television, that actually expands out across all of season one, where you're having this very long conversation with the network or streamer about what show we're actually making. Are we making the same show? And every time that you get into a notes session, at this point in my career, I'm listening to and judging whether we are or we are not. And so moving people, part of at least the show running side and the producing side with networks and streamers is, well, how do I move them into making the show that I want to make, the one that's on the page, the one that I delivered? Because I'm hearing a lot of things. So I'll use this as an example. When I worked on Flash Forward, which was the very first television show I worked on, it was at ABC. And we would have 3-hour-long note sessions with the network on scripts, which is backbreaking. Those note sessions were really nothing more than ABC saying, can these two characters kiss more? And can we get a little more soap going on over here? We're making a television show about quantum physics and time. And ABC was saying, ABC is about people kissing and soaps.
I got to watch more ABC.
Right. But instead of having that conversation, which is very, very direct, people were talking around the issue in little marginal ways. And that's how you get a 3-hour notes meeting.
Yeah.
And that's how you very much figure out we are not on the same page about what is happening. Now, for me, the worst note is this one, which is, can you make this funnier?
Yeah.
Oh.
So the problem with that note is it assumes I have a better joke in my back pocket that I'm saving for a better day.
Right.
It's like, no, dude, the best joke I have is in the script. We can agree or disagree around whether it's funny or not. But the idea that there is like chest of drawers that I can go, well, all right, you didn't buy the half funny one, so I guess I'm gonna have to get the funny one. Right, is an insult to what's happening. So, and the generality of that note is also a killer. I can't go back to the writer's desk and actually write something that is just as general as it needs to be funnier. Funnier according to who?
Yeah.
Because that's a taste note. I need to hear from you what you think is funny. I need a specific there, a target that I can then hit. Very broad notes like, could this be funnier? It needs to be more exciting, is not something that a writer can go back to their desk and solve. It's too broad, right? It's too big.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is exciting, what you think is exciting are not the same. Otherwise, you wouldn't be giving the note. So you need to give me a specific as to how you think this could be funnier or this could be more exciting. So there's a general rule that I use inside the writer's room and that I try and have this conversation with executives when we get into this file. And it goes like this. I'd rather you not pull a thread that you don't have a needle handy to sew back together.
Okay.
So anybody can pull threads and go like, yeah, man, I don't get it. I don't like it. It's not funny. It's not exciting. Well, okay, that leaves us nowhere because I sat down and did this and gave it to you. So clearly I think it is. If we want to collaborate and get to common ground, you're going to have to be super specific about how we're going to get there so that I can make that correction. If you don't give me that, I'm just going back to the writer's room, throw more darts. I hope it's better next time, but there's no guarantee. And that's development hell.
And so what I'm hearing between the two of you is specificity versus broad or generalities, and also kind of constructive versus, platitudinal or whatever. So Owen, come in, defend your fellow people. Just kidding. But like, Owen, when you hear this, does this sound familiar? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think it does sound familiar. Hi, everybody. Good to see all the faces. It does sound super familiar, and I would say also extraordinarily writer-centric response to the two notes. And what I mean by that is, I just think feedback. I think, Jimmy, I heard the exact same thing. I heard two people whose worst moments in receiving notes was not an acknowledgement for the hard work that was done on behalf of said executive. That they've spent a long time, if we're putting this in like workout terms, they sat there and done push-ups night after night and honed their body to beefcake status. And now they're ready to take off their shirts. And of course, the director does not give a shit if they have a really rockin' bod or not. They're way more concerned about the color of pants they're wearing. So I think
you could still lose a few more pounds. That's what
yeah, exactly. Like, what's up with that? But I think that's like a little bit of the challenge for I think more notes happen between producers and writers than executives and writers. But I think executives and writers, the executive notes are heard more loudly and probably ripple over time a little longer just because of their importance. But really, I think for a producer 101 is to establish rapport with the person you're working with, understand who they are, what they like, what they don't like. You need like to really get to know somebody. Like you need to understand, for Quinton's example, like, yeah, what is funny to you? Did you think that so you think you can leave is funny, or do you think Family Guy's funny? Maybe you think both of those things are funny. Or so you think you can, so I think you should leave? I don't know.
I think you should leave, but So You Think You Should Leave should be its own separate show.
Okay, got it. That's the sequel. But yeah, I mean, so I think that is a kind of a real, I think the producer process is one that yields where you have something else in mind, where if Quinton is turning in a script and your reaction is to give a note that's like, it's not funny, I'm not laughing, and we sold a comedy, or we're trying to sell a comedy, then we need to get on the same page about what's funny and where are the jokes that aren't landing and why, and is it the wrong style or whatever. And I think, and then if it's a drama, and I think the funny thing about, it's been a while since I've really dipped into the family, genre. So I think it's, apologies, Claire. I definitely came to it from isn't family and rom-com, how dissimilar are those two genres?
Right.
That's probably my bad and my ignorance. But I think the idea of looking anybody in the face after they've done a lot of work and say, hey, I think that this is not right, is just a tough way to be a coworker, let alone, somebody who is trying to build a machine together. I do think an executive role, like producers and executives, are essentially a very similar skill set, except one is working for a corporation and then one is working outside of, one is in sales basically.
Yeah.
And one is like in kind of internal sales, like really more of like you have to sell upstairs rather than, it's like, actually, if one's in sales, one's in persuasion, if you can understand the difference. And the executive, I think, has a broad set of goals that they're trying to service that are not all the way and all the time compatible with even a writer you bought a script with. Meaning, Quinton is writing a half-hour comedy and about, Goldilocks and Three Bears. And, 2 weeks ago in a meeting, the programming head said, it'd be really cool if we had some like dark fairy tales on, for this Sunday night slot. There's no more slots like that, but if we could get a dark fairy tale going for this specific demo that really likes dark fairy tales. So then you're sitting there, whether you know it or not, as an executive, you're kind of shading Quinton's project towards a goal that you may not even be conscious of, but that's just the way that the kind of corporate strategy aligns. Or, by the way, maybe you guys both bought it for a reason, and the paperwork took a year to complete, and now Quinton and I are like, the heat is on. I got to make this, I got to sweat this project out, because it is not if it comes in its current form, it's going to get passed on immediately because we don't need that anymore. So I think that there's like a level of bobbing and weaving in the executive front that sometimes you can't say that. Yeah. It's like, Quinton, you're such a good negotiator. Your lawyer's such a good negotiator. You got the most amount of money, but now we can't do the thing that we originally wanted to do with this. It's fallen into a different bucket. Now you're competing with a different show, and I can't tell you any of this stuff. So instead it comes out like, nah, make it funnier. Yeah. So I think as an executive, it's a little bit, your hands are tied behind your back. Anyway, I can go on and on, but I'll pause there.
No, it's good. So what I'm hearing you talk about is I hear you talking a lot about just building relational capital, like just, essentially as a producer, getting on the same page, which is what I heard Quinton and Claire saying, which is like, the context matters, right? Like, who am I actually working with? Like, am I trying to make a comedy? Am I trying to make a romantic comedy? Am I trying to make a thriller? Am I trying to make a post-apocalyptic, so I guess before I want to come back to the best note you were ever given, but I want to use this to segue into this. Yeah. What I hear there, Claire, is this idea of building relationship with producers and executives, and how do you go about doing that, and how does a producer go about connecting with you? In other words, what if they like you? Do they just read? Do they contact your manager and say, give me everything Claire's ever written because I'm looking for X and I want to see if she's capable of X? Or are they only coming to you for a very specific area. How are you building relationships with people? Because I know, for instance, you just came back from shooting something, which is probably a little bit different than some other stuff you've done. So I'm just curious, like, how do you go about building a relationship with decision makers?
That's a great question, because that is everything. That's the entire world of show business. I'm not entirely sure how to answer it, other than I think a little bit of what Owen was saying too. I mean, you just have coffee and lunch with everyone all the time when you are, coming up, and you just you just pay attention and are kind to people, and you build relationships, and some of them stick naturally. Some of them stick because it's like, oh, we have a similar worldview about movies, or worldview about work ethic, or or we have different worldviews. You're the devil, but you run Sony, so I'll still be nice to you. That's a tough question, but what it really made me think about is, while it is true and beautiful and good to be a kind and good person and make good relationships in the world of show business, and it's necessary, it is who you know, it's always who you know. But still, when it comes to giving notes to writers, I have gotten great notes from people I'm not in great relationship with, or I mean that I'm not in deep relationship with. I have received good notes because they know story and they understand, even as we're talking about comedy, which it's a really tough thing to give notes on a comedy script. But what helps is if you're given a script that, or if you as a producer and executive in this group read a script and it's like, oh, it's just not funny, it's just not, I didn't laugh once, knowing what a comedy script needs, which is a really strong premise. It's like, okay, let's go back to the basics. Let's look at the premise again, and let's look at the relationships between the characters, because you can't just add notes on top of a premise that's not working, or relationships that are not in conflict in the script. So focus on that. Don't, like the notes I have gotten that I will remember forever are just from people who knew story. And again, the word context, who knew story context, because like the genre of this film is horror or family or rom-com. I know what the beats of that should be. And so I can help you find what's missing. Let's talk about what's missing in the script, why it's not hitting, not just layer some jokes or some jump scares.
Like where do you see the gaps, so that we can address those kind of specific gaps, and we're not just plugging a sinking ship if we need to address the premise. Quinton, do you get, is it, I'm not trying to ask I am a stupid person sometimes, but I'm not trying to ask a stupid question here, but it's like, they know you through your writing, right? So part of it is they get to know you through reading your scripts, right? So how do you write yourself into other genres? If you're trying to build relationships with producers, and even like, I know managers help with this, but like, how do you not get pigeonholed? How do you make yourself known in other categories, so that producers think of you, and come to you on more than just a specific type of genre? Or is that literally too much to ask?
No, not at all, because I've done it several times. I do it regularly. And so there's some nuance there, which is, and I want to roll back to the relationship question and all that, which is, it's not just your work. Like, one of the pieces of wisdom that was passed on to me very early on is that 50% of the pitch meeting is about whether I can stand to be in the room with you. And when you're in television, it's 80%. So that's relational, and that's relational capital. that gets built over time and travels with you in the community, and that gets passed along as the story that they tell about you. Both the people that you have worked with and the people who work for you, meaning your reps, will talk about your personality to prospective people who are going to employ you. So that's relational capital. You need to understand that that is very, very, very real. So it's not always just what's on the page. It's what comes with that page. What was it like to work with him? Like we're talking about tonight, what was he like during the notes process? If you ask him to do a quick polish, was the next phone call that you got from his lawyer asking for more money? So all of those pieces matter. So that piece really needs to be understood. This is a human relational endeavor that you're involved in. Like you said before, if you want to go it alone, we have performance art and poetry, and please get in that lane. But the rest of us have to live in community, and people will constantly be talking about who you are in community, right? That's just the truth. So you need to understand that. And the idea of switching genres or diversifying, another great piece of wisdom, and given to me by my very first agent, and I've always kept it close to my heart. The whole purpose of a spec script is to tell buyers who you are today. Who are you today? And this is why you need to write them regularly, because you're not the same person you were 5 years ago. Right? Even if you're doing strictly family dramas, the way in which you articulate family dramas 5 years from now, based on the landscape of other competing projects and who you are as a person, won't be the same as the spec you currently have. So the great thing about being a writer is the ability, when the time is right, to reintroduce yourself to the community and say, I think the greatest band in the world is today. It's the Rolling Stones, and here's why. I know I used to listen to Mozart, but now I love the Rolling Stones. And that you are able to deliver on the page that passion that sits right at the center of your thinking today. It's all you want to talk about. And it doesn't matter. Now, there's a little caveat. I'll come back a second. It doesn't matter if you're changing genres. What matters is what can you deliver on the page that they can read. And then when they talk to you, they feel that like, oh my God, we have to finish this call now. They're drowning me in passion around sci-fi or whatever it happens to be. Now, when you're really beginning, don't do that. So here I go with an asterisk at the bottom of the page. In the beginning, because you're just trying to get out in the community and be seen as legitimate, pick one lane and stay in it until you've had some success there. Don't switch lanes every year, because people will get confused. They won't really believe you after a while that you have passion. It feels like you're fishing for whatever is hot this year. You're looking for a job. You're not actually interested in what you say you're interested in. You just want to be in the business. And that's, from the producer and executive side, that's a losing proposition, because producers need you to be so passionate about this subject that you've got an extra gear available when the going gets rough. You just love it. You just want to dig in and dig in and dig in. And that means being in a lane that you love, understanding that you are saying to people, this is who I am right now, and I love it, and I'm crazy for this kind of storytelling, and this is what I'm all about. And then when you've had some success there, you can go, oh, I'm a little different now. I'm thinking this is cool over here. And you can write your way into that next piece instead of just I'm throwing things up against the wall and I'm going to see what sticks.
That's good. Owen, have you ever passed on a project because the writer was a jerk, or like how much goes into what Quinton was saying there about, you know, the relationship aspect of the business? Has that paid off for you, or have you seen maybe even other people get burned by making deals with people that the project was great on page, but then all of a sudden you got into working with them and realized it was a mistake? Just thoughts on that.
Yes. By the
Name
way, Quinn, I
names.
really.
Names.
Oh man, I do. I actually have a great story on this that, like, it actually makes me look terrible, but I'll tell it anyway. But before I do that, Quentin, I really loved what you said about the spec script, and then also being really intentional about who you are, like set up some pillars and follow that. I think that, by the way, writing, I think most pillars kind of transcend genre, like in form. You know, if you're like writing about, you know, like I have seen relationships that are really important to me be in comedy or drama or action or sci-fi, you know, like it shows up in a lot of different ways. So I think that it's kind of like, if you're really writing from a place of truth, then that's going to transcend whatever genre you're in.
Yeah.
And Claire, I totally also, there was definitely a moment. I'm going to skip that story for brevity, but I really liked what you had to say too. And I'll tell you a story later that is funny. But on to the assholes. For the first, I don't know, I was there for 8 years originally. I worked at AMC Network for 8 years as an executive, and we had a show called The Killing, and The Killing was an adaptation of a Danish format, and it was very much like a serialized whodunit when those things weren't especially popular. You know, there weren't like 50 of them out in the marketplace. There's only a couple, and we had such a nice track record there that it really felt like a nice move for us to do. But we were so self-conscious because we were the Mad Men and Breaking Bad channel. Us doing a police whodunit was like a little like, are we watering ourselves down by doing this? So we made a point to make sure that writer's room was filled with people who had really distinct voices. And the showrunner, Vina Sood, was on board with that. And so we hired some amazing writers in that room, and one of which was a guy named Nick Pizzolatto. And Nick.
Say no more.
Yeah, say no more. Well, Nick got fired off that show, or asked to leave. Either way, however you say, work from home. I guess before working from home was a pleasure. It was a demotion. And he turned in a great script, but truthfully, people had a hard time being in the same room with him. His energy was just way off. And so when he came back around years later, or a couple years later, to pitch True Detective, in the room, I was in that room, in walks Matthew McConaughey, Woody Harrelson, Nick Pizzolatto, Cary Fukunaga, like amazing people that we should be so lucky to have worked with. And at the time so The Killing was off the air, or maybe it was like going off, but we had like another cop show that was in development that was out of pilot, and we were already working with. It hadn't come out yet. So this True Detective show walks in, and suddenly, and we were kind of like concerned about the other cop show that was in there, because this thing, True Detective, such big auspices. How amazing would we be? Like, this pole vaults us into HBO territory, you know, if we weren't there already. And then suddenly, you know, he starts talking, and then everybody who worked on that show, Nick worked with Nick on The Killing. He started pitching True Detective, and we all had like weird flashbacks. And I actually made eye contact with one of my colleagues during the pitch and was like, we cannot. And then afterwards, after that pitch, that show that we were working on became the greatest show ever, and we could not buy another cop show. guys, we're just like, this other show is going to be so good. Like, why are we double develop? It doesn't make any sense. They're going to want a thing. And so we passed on True Detective, which ended up obviously being a tentpole show, and one that was, truly probably worth all the headaches that whoever had to cover it went through. But, there is a life's too short element to all of these things. And I do think that the 80% just hanging out, like, film producers who end up working in television, I don't think understand that you shouldn't win every argument or even get into arguments because you're married now. You have to be a part of each other's lives in an ongoing basis. And so I think that, like, the getting along with somebody is like intrinsic to who you are. And honestly, there have been meetings where, I will have read somebody and thought it was fine writing, but they're in the room and I just like them and we're vibing and the energy is right. And I'm like, whatever, let's see what we can do together. Let's just go for it because I enjoy this, and that happens more often than not.
Yeah, that's good. Well, that's a great story. So if you love True Detective, then you must hate Owen. That's great. And by the way, Owen, if I remember correctly, you turned down True Detective. I think it was for Diagnosis Murder. Is that the show that you? I'm just kidding.
Another, yeah, exactly.
No.
Okay, wait, Jimmy. I'm going to interrupt because it's kind of interesting to me that you're talking about Veena Sood, who the creator of The Killing, and she's from Vancouver, which is where I'm from. And we were both part of a comedy improv theater in Vancouver back in the day. And she and I did not cross paths. We have a dear friend who is constantly like, we have to get you two together. But Veena performed with Vancouver Theatre Sports and I performed with Vancouver Theatre Sports for years.
Nice.
And then she went off to do The Killing, not exactly an improv comedy show. Like, Jimmy, you're talking about different, bringing your voice to different genres. And I recently wrote my first horror, like full on horror script, which, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the pillars of a story, the basis is the same in all genres. And I really enjoyed bringing what I've learned from doing family comedy, family drama, and rom-coms into the world of horror. It's really rich and the script is doing well. So it's I love seeing that mesh of different genres and different people. Like you don't know what someone's background is because they've written a horror or a murder spree. Yeah, that's cool.
I'd love to take a couple of questions from the students, but before I do, just real quick, if you guys could just real succinctly, was there a really great note that you've mentioned a few things, but was there a really great note, Claire and Quinton, you were given once that you're just like, man, that was just a great note. I don't know if you can be as specific as possible, but I'm just curious if there was something that you were working on that maybe why it was so great for you, why it was such an important or good note for you, I should say.
Yeah, I have one that's, again, I could go on and on about what the situation was, but I had a project with Billy Crystal called Have a Nice Day. And based on an idea that I'd cooked up, which was basically death comes to collect the president of the United States, and it turns into a two-hander about how the president spends his last day on Earth.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah.
And you can listen to it on Audible for free because we staged it.
Wow. That's
with Kevin Kline and Ed Benning. It was an amazing thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but during the course of that, and as a side note, we did 22 drafts before we turned it into the studio.
Wow.
So, welcome to Billy Crystal. But the nature of what could have been super surfacey and maybe a little fizzy was turned on its head when Billy gave me a note on the script, which was this: just tell the truth. Right? And it all boils down to that. Now, the truth is a fungible object or whatever, but in a situation where you're even dealing with genre elements, in this case, there's an angel walking through the White House, the angel of death. You still have to tell the truth. You still have to find the truth of the scene. And if you can do that, then everything else hangs on that cohesively. What is the truth about this? And you have to find that in yourself, inside the scene, inside the idea. What is true for me here? That has to be the gravitational center. Otherwise, you can't write it. You can write some funny jokes, right? And you can make it like surfacey, but you're going to need the truth of that scene. And then ultimately, I saw it up on its feet. Now we're in a room with Kevin Kline and Annette Bening, Rachel Dratch, all of these people. And every single talented actor in that room was navigating towards that thing. What is true in this scene? I need to know what is true in this scene. They're not talking about their motivation. They're trying to search out the truth of the scene so that they can then serve that. So Billy's note absolutely transforms the whole situation for directors and everybody else who's going to come along after me. If I haven't found the truth, they'll decide what it is for themselves, and who knows where they're going to land there.
That's good. That's good. Claire, how about you?
No, that's really good, Quentin. That's deep, man. That's going to make me, I'm going to have to ruminate on that a bit.
Yeah.
I just wanted to use the word ruminate. I was thinking about
There
it
you go.
even before this panel. No, that's not easy. That's a good note, but it's a hard one. Like, get to the truth in every scene. Well, my turn to name drop, I suppose. The best note, or the one that I return to the most, the one that has stuck with me, like Quentin was saying too, came from, actually, the first feature I worked on was an animated movie, Curious George. And the fantastical William Goldman was on that project for a while, which was, I know.
Wow.
Mic drop. But it was amazing. And we were specifically stuck with a third act problem. And he said, you don't have a third act problem. You have a first act problem. Your third act problem is always solved in your first act.
Yes.
So, I mean, it's always true. It's 100% true and always true.
That is so good. That is so good. If you have a question, go ahead and put your little hand thing up so I know when to call on you. There you go. Okay, let's go with, I feel like this is like daytime talk radio. Shannon, you're live with the panel.
Thank you so much, you guys, for being here with us. This is amazing info. Owen, if you don't mind, can I ask you a question about the killing? That one's sort of in my sights right now for something else. I know that you were obviously at AMC. Were you sort of intimate in the process of the development of the show too? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Grew up in Seattle, so it's near and dear to my heart for that. But I read the pilot script and absolutely loved it. I don't know what draft that was, but I wanted to ask you about the chemistry between the two leads. Specifically, I mean, it crackles in the script, but on screen, it's nuts. And I was wondering if that was purposeful or if it was discovered, like getting, for an example, like Rip and Beth in Yellowstone. There was like no storyline there. They crackled on screen, I guess. I had read somewhere, and it spiraled into this giant. And now they have a spinoff. It was never intended to be what it became. So I was wondering, because I loved the way the tension was built, the humanity, and then how we're chasing this mystery, but we're also, I was like so in deep with these two people in a way that I've never really been pulled in by a show. And I wanted to know if that was always the intention or if that was born from the crackle between the two leads. I hope my question makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, there are always happy accidents when it comes to shows. And I think Quentin and Claire, who have also had shows made and seen their scripts come to life, there's always things on screen where you're like, oh my god, like I had no idea, like that piece of production design added story when there was none there, or this this choice about wardrobe is now, informs a piece of backstory never thought about. One example of that is I was actually on set while we're continuing to name drop. I was on set with the very first time that Giancarlo Esposito was introduced on Breaking Bad. His character was, and there was a discussion of whether he should be wearing a wedding ring or not. And we went back and forth, and it was literally like just a conversation with the writer and him, and showrunner wasn't around, and so it was just like executives got in on it, other actors did, and so it's like a wonderful thing. The Killing, though, however, is not that. The Killing was based on a format from Denmark, and we had seen two great actors do these two roles before, and Murray was, a lead pretty early. I feel like I think we zoomed in on her pretty early, and then Joel Kinnaman, we found just from reading, he had done Snabakash, but not anything else, and then he could only do an English accent with that weird, like hip hop kind of like Baroque thing. He couldn't be not Swedish without that. So that is part of like, so he just kind of like, he was more real because he was like used as such a crutch. So yeah, we did a chemistry read, and it was immediately clear. Oh, there was a very funny thing in the chemistry read. He actually like legitimately tripped and like knocked over a bunch of stuff, and then he like responded in character, and she was like helping him but kind of insulting him, and then at that point it was like, oh, they're kind of flirting. Like, that's awesome. So,
okay, thank you so much.
That was a good question, by the way.
That was a very
thank you. I appreciate that.
This is my chance to name drop. Ray and her significant other always shops the same Target I did. and I kid you not, we would, and for some reason, it's like, I guess our schedules were similar. So it's like every week we would be at the Target at the same time. And I told my wife, I said, I know they think I'm stalking them because they're the famous ones, but I'm pretty sure they're stalking me. Anyway, so Justin, you're up, buddy.
Hi. Yeah, I had a question I thought would be interesting to hear from all you guys' perspective. How do you know when a script is ready to be sent off to an executive or a producer?
Tricky question. Tricky.
No, it's pretty easy. Like, what's the due date on the contract? I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's that's a nuanced question in that it's a really, really personal journey for the team. And there are business aspects to it about when you need to deliver and what expectations are around it. That in television has gotten looser and looser as we've gone along. As streaming has come, it's more like features, which is nobody really has to make anything or ever say yes. So how long can we string this along is where we are right now in television. But from a creative standpoint, and there is a point of diminishing returns where the notes that you're giving, where the process you're going through is actually taking you backwards, and everybody starts to feel it. And if you can recognize that, it's time, right? You may not have solved every possible problem and solved every question, but now the notes process is leading to diminishing returns. We're getting worse as we go, and everybody's feeling exhausted and worn out. That is a red flag to let you know it's time to go. Or fire me and find somebody else. So that's how that goes. But after a while, you get a sense of this team now has their best vision on the page, and it's time to turn it in. And hopefully that corresponds with the agreed upon contractual timeline. And the thing that I say all the time is we do the best we can with the time we're given. And if you give me 2 weeks, you'll get what you get from me in 2 weeks. And if you let the clock run it, I'll do the best that I can while you have me. But that may not be the best I'm capable of.
I mean, it's a little bit like when someone asks, how did you know you wanted to marry your spouse, right? It's like, well, I either I knew, I loved her and I didn't want to I didn't want to go the rest of my life without her. But also, she's like, hey, poop or get off the pot, ring, right? So in a sense, it's like there's a timeline to that, right? Like, so if the control, to Claire's point, like you're contractually obligated to turn something in, it's all there for a reason. It's all, in the end, all creatives need deadlines, right, Claire, when you say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a deadline is the best muse ever. But I think that when you're talking about handing it into an executive or a producer, then you're on the job. It's not like a spec. You can take 10 years to perfect your spec. But if you've been hired to deliver a script, you have a deadline that everyone has agreed on, and you have a grace period that's that's depending on your relationship with the executive. I guess this goes back to relational, but I think, I mean, you only get one chance at that read. So pushing it's better to hand it in a little bit late and good than on time and bad. But also to Quentin's point, like, and also Jimmy's, it's like, at what point is it good enough to hand in? That's almost an impossible question. I think within a week of it being due, pretty much. It's like it's a business, as much as an art form.
Owen, from your perspective, like I think what Claire said was great. On time, not so good. A few days, a little bit later, and much better. Like, how are you gauging it at your level?
I mean, you have to set a goal. You have to tell, when you start developing with a writer, you have to set where's the end zone? What are we aiming for? What is the purpose of this? If you've gone 3 rounds and you're still with the writer and you're still like, yeah, it's just not funny enough. Like, hopefully you're not saying that, but I think that there's a level in which, like, there's a project right now that I struggle with, even though it's like a video game that I've wined and dined everybody and embraced everybody, and we're all holding hands and singing Kumbaya, and the writer just, doesn't have it. And so I've never given them anything, and it's probably going to die, but I can't. But I have a choice between letting it go a little bit longer or changing gears and going with another person. But I sold it with him, so I have to kind of let it play out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of have a specific question for Claire. I have to ask, I know you worked on Princess Diaries. If was there, I'm sure every project you do, you think of like, wow, this is it. But like for that one, was there a moment where you were like, wow, this is really, because I have friends still dressing up as Princess Mia for Halloween.
Oh, yeah. So what your question, like, was that a highlight, or what do you mean?
Just like, was there a moment where you were like, I think that this is going to be pretty big? Like, did you know that kind of from the start, or were you surprised about how big it is and still was or still is?
No, I mean, I don't think you ever know. It was one of the first projects I worked on where people kept using the term major motion picture, which I thought that was pretty funny. It's like, oh, this is real. I'm not a credited writer on that. I did a little consulting on the script. It was a joy from start to finish, for sure. It was like having a princess experience being a part of that movie. Gary Marshall was one of the most joyful directors of all time. I've never worked with anyone as joyful on set as Gary Marshall, which is how he got his brand of comedy out into the world. He was an absolute delight, who also gave a note that I employ as a producer, and I certainly used it on the project that we just shot over the last couple of months, which was very tight budget in Ireland. So, yeah, I mean, crazy people. And Gary Marshall said, if you have a position of authority, just take the blame if something goes wrong. Just take the blame. Then everyone can move on. because it's like if something goes wrong on set, and I guess this could include, well, it wouldn't include the script because you'd have to be the writer, but if something goes wrong on set or in development, and everyone, especially on set, everyone is like, the light bulb falls and crashes and everyone freezes, because a set is like being in an ER. Everything is so important. It's life or death. Every single thing, every single minute is money. And everyone freezes. It's like, whose fault was that? Like looking around, like who to blame. And Gary would literally like, oh, that was my fault, even though he's across the room in Video Village or doing whatever. That was me. And everyone just is like, oh, it doesn't matter who it was. It was a mistake. And, the bulb gets swept up and we all move on. And you love Gary and you want to do anything in the world to please him, with the film. And so I learned a lot. I did a couple of projects with Gary. In fact, he was going to direct a script that I had written, and I would love to have seen how it turned out with him. But his attitude towards the people that he worked with was always paying attention, always being kind. And that whole thing about take the blame, I thought was really great advice. And then my last thing about Princess Diaries was, I don't know how this happened because I had a very, very, very minor role in that movie as an actor, but I got to share. My dressing room was right next to Julie Andrews, and we got our makeup done together every morning for 3 weeks. I still can't believe that happened to me.
Wow.
Like, that's just like, what? How did
That's
that?
awesome.
So
That's awesome.
one day I'll do a podcast of Julie Andrews stories. But thank you for asking about Princess Diaries. It was an absolute delight. Both films were a delight to do. So, be fun.
And by the way, I think Claire's being a little bit modest. One of the reasons why she was cast on that is that she's very, very funny. And Gary Marshall knew that. And that's kind of a big deal when someone of his caliber says, that gal's funny, And
He had more of an accent like that girl. She's funny. I should bring her into my movie. It's true.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, we're just name dropping left and right. Another one.
Yeah.
All right, Deanne, do you have a question?
Hello, Owen. I'm a friend of Mark Finley. He says hello.
Oh, awesome. That's great.
I have a question for all of you. It's relating to you. If you work with a team that you love, the producers, executive producers, everybody, and you love this story, have you ever, sometimes when you pitch studios or people that you pitch into, they want to see their pilot and then maybe 2 episodes. Have you written it without getting paid, or is it always you must be paid and then you have it and then you pitch? How does that work?
No, I mean, it's again, in the era that we're currently in, there's no hard and fast rule. You'll have a lot of people who will invent or try and reinvent the wheel. But certainly at the point where I am as a producer and a writer, and one of the things that I have to say to people all the time is like, hey, if you had a buddy who was a plumber and your sink got stopped up, would you call him at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night to come on over to your house and fix it for free?
Yeah.
Because what we do is actually a job. It's a craft. When we sit down, we should be paid for that. Now, maybe it's not a hard and fast rule, but the dear friends that I have all understand that this is work, and that certainly at my stage, I have bills to pay like everybody else, and that my time is worth something. And my skill, all the hours that I've invested to become an expert at this was business capital. That's capital that I invested in my business. And when you ask me to work for free, you are asking for a capital investment from me in you. And I love you, but this capital is really, really important to my business. And this is where Hollywood gets a little blurry because we will be friendly with people. We will have friends who will ask for favors, and you have to decide how your business and your friendship overlaps. And that's a very personal decision.
Quinton, if I could just interrupt.
Yeah.
Isn't part of the dilemma, and then Owen, Claire, jump in here, but isn't part of the kind of the sticky weirdness that sometimes we get when it comes to this is the constant kind of almost perpetual of what could be. Everything is so speculative. So it's like, hey, if you do work, a lot of the conversations do work now for a big payoff later, right? But what happens is, like you said, the payoff never comes, and I've got bills to pay now. And so, but I do feel like sometimes that's where the weirdness comes. I'm talking like regular deals. I have a friend, I think Owen knows well, who's a blacklist writer who had one of the top scripts multiple times. And he told me I think they did 67 drafts on that script, and they were only paid once. And that was a blacklist script, right? Like that was a part of, like, and anyway, just is part of the issue that, would you say, Quinton?
Well, I was thinking about the Billy Crystal script. You did 22 drafts. They paid you 22 drafts to do it, or how's that?
It was hotly contested. They didn't pay for all 23. They certainly paid for more than they wanted to. Right? So we get deep into that process where, and again, I don't think he would, well, I'll set that aside. Maybe he would. His process in order to get a script ready was this, which was multiple rounds. Right? And that was not explained to me ahead of time. So I got into that situation and had to throw a flag, and it was not appreciated.
Yeah.
It was not appreciated, but that led to a very, very clarifying, and again, this goes to relationship, a very clarifying conversation between he and I about method. And that's where a lot of what I'm talking about comes from. It was heated, and I don't think he still shares my opinion. While he understands it, he doesn't share it. And the working out of two different processes is what we have to do everywhere. And I had to say to him, if we're going to just do endless drafts, there have to be mile markers, a little bit like Owen said beforehand. I need to know where the finish line is, and I need to know when I'm getting paid.
Yeah.
So if we can decide on that, I'll do as many drafts as you want. So that had to be established, but we were already mid-relationship when that came up.
Yeah. And Owen, there's obviously the WGA has restrictions now on what you can ask writers to do, correct?
It does. It doesn't mean, I think, that people are following those. But look, I think the WGA restrictions come in a lot more. They're a lot more effective when you're working with a studio, because there's actually a larger entity that you can hold account to with business affairs attorneys and stuff like that. I mean, I think if the only thing I would add to this is that I think it's a producer's job to sell a project, selling it to other parties to package them together, selling it to a studio, selling it to executives, selling it to blank, blank, blank. I think part of the job of a producer is to sell your writer on what it is that you need them to do to sell it. So I think the idea of a writer feeling like they need one thing or another is within their bounds, as it is your bounds to try and convince them of whatever it is otherwise. And I think that is best when it's at the beginning of the relationship, but it doesn't always work out that way. And so I think it's uncomfortable, but it's just a part of our business.
Yeah.
I think that one of the great things from this is, I mean, it's just hard to remember, but you have free will. You get to choose if you're going to do another. You get to choose how many drafts you like. Quentin had the conversation. It's like you get to choose. And I think when you're starting out, you're going to do a wider berth of it, and you come to a place where it's like you can start to gauge. If I'm working with Billy Crystal, do a few more drafts than, if I'm working with a first-time producer on an independent film it's like, but to gauge for yourself what you are willing to do based on the project, based on your passion for it. But always to remember, it's like, oh, I'm not a victim. Nobody is forcing me to do this. I can say no. It is up to me.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
the WGA.
And the WGA. Patrick, you had a question.
Yeah, for Owen, I was curious if you had experiences or advice about telling a showrunner that their project isn't moving forward. And on the other side of that, Quentin and Claire, if you've been on the receiving side of that, what advice you might have about, I don't know, not sending whatever the email is that you're thinking in your head after you're.
Oh man,
Patrick would like to fire some people, and he would like. No, it's okay.
that's hard. That's the hardest thing. I mean, I've definitely had to let a lot of people go over the years. I mean, not more in my capacity as a producer than as an executive. Executive, you're really only working with writers, unless you're pretty high up, you run a department, and then you're, hiring or letting go coworkers. But, look, the more experienced a writer is, the more they understand, and they aren't blindsided by something. That's the nice thing, and more that they are adults who understand these things happen. The more junior somebody is, you really have to really talk a lot. I mean, the big thing here, and what is, I think, even though that's the worst situation possible for most working relationships, you have to just say it immediately. I mean, it's like when you call, this is not a good news call. We're not making conversation. I'm so sorry. I got bad news, or I'm so sorry. This was a decision I was a part of, but don't fully own, but I'm the one who's calling you now, and we are not moving forward. Or, look, the hardest ones are, and I'm sure Quentin and Claire, you've probably been in this situation. The hardest ones are when something you got through so many processes when they used to make pilots, and then not greenlight the pilots of series. You like cast it, you did, you had test screenings, you go through, you edit it, you put in that cool Pearl Jam song that you love, and suddenly, and then you like sit there and you're just like, man, how do you not love this? And those are the hardest, because you've already been to war and back, and yet it just doesn't feel like it's right. I still remember those calls to myself, getting them, and I still remember probably every single one I ever did, which is probably a testament to how kind of emotionally crippling they are.
I have a thing. We were talking before we came on about Dallas Willard, and this is a Dallas Willard quote: "The truth spoken without love is always going to be brutal."
Mm.
And what he means by that really is the Christian conception of love, meaning actively working for and hoping for the good of the other.
Mm.
So if you speak the truth without that, it's going to be brutal. And I have suffered with that consistently around these kinds of phone calls, and also indulging in it myself. Right? So I have been the victim of and the perpetrator, sometimes on the same show. And so the calls from the Owens of the world, or whoever, who have always come into the conversation and said, man, the first words out of their mouth are, man, I am brokenhearted. Means that everything that follows after that is better. Right? It just acknowledges that we all loved this and we gave it our best, and we feel like it's a tragedy that it's not going forward. Right? So that's a truth spoken in love. Your show is still not going forward, but it's given to you in such a way that you can bear, as opposed to, and I will tell tales out of school, spending 2 years on a Mitch Albom project for Amazon and never getting a phone call, never having a conversation with anyone, to basically hear, after much, much, much arm twisting from my reps at CAA, that the project wasn't going forward. When I had a relationship with, I can't even tell you how many people at Amazon and NBC Universal, and not a single individual sent me an email or a phone call. So that is the truth spoken without love, and it is brutal. And it doesn't have to, it, like we were saying before, to Claire's very thoughtful admonition, that's a choice. Somebody made that choice. It didn't have to be that way. You chose that. So that's the brutal part. And you never, as best you can, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to deliver that news and be brutal. It's a choice. You don't have to make that choice.
And you're right too, Quentin, because you probably will a couple of times.
Yes.
I mean, you know, it's like over your career, there's going to be that time you just didn't have it in you to make the call, or make the call well, you know, to have compassion on yourself as well. But I just want to add too, like it comes back to Bill Goldman's, it's like your third act is going to reflect your first act. If you had a good relationship with the writer and you treated them well all along the way, it's going to end better than if you never invested in them and now you also have to call them and say your show's not going. So,
and I think that it's one of the great values of this class, this panel today, is this return to again and again to relational part of this, which is, this isn't the last job I'm going to have, right? And this isn't the last show you're going to need to get on the air, or you're going to need a writer for. So what relationship are we carrying with each other into the future is really going to turn around how you fired me, right? Even though you may not have wanted to fire me. So and I tell this to young people all the time, I went in for a general early on in my career at Hearst, when the Hearst Corporation made TV. And I sat out in the office for a half hour before the meeting, just chit-chatting with the assistant, blah, 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 my usual razzmatazz. Well, 10 years later, I get a phone call from my agents who say, this executive is calling from Freeform and they're offering you a job without even meeting. Do you know this person? And I was like, oh my God, that's that assistant who I only interacted with that person once, waiting to go into a meeting. And now she's got a job that she's just giving to me because of who I was in that waiting room 10 years ago. So that's the relational capital that you build over time, and you should constantly be aware of. You're doing that always in the waiting room and when you're getting fired.
You never know when you're entertaining angels or possible new agents.
Yes.
Right. That's right. That's really good, you guys. It makes me think about the Act One core values of truth, goodness, and beauty. And oftentimes with the screenwriters, they're like focused on how do you imbue those qualities into, the essence of what they're writing. But what I'm constantly reminding them of, and these producing and executive students is, that's for your life. If you imbue your life with those things, your work will be an overflow of living a life of truth, goodness, and beauty. And we're supposed to be different. We're supposed to not be like everyone else. And if we're all motivated by the typical things that other people are motivated by, there's no difference. But if we're motivated by truth, goodness, and beauty, then we will stand out. And I think that's beautifully stated there, that, you know, maybe it doesn't quote unquote pay off immediately, but maybe 10 years. And you, by the way, you weren't the way you were because you knew it was going to pay off 10 years from now. But my point being is, if we're walking around living our lives, treating people the way we want to be treated, that is something that can come back to us over time. I want to hit you guys up with two quick things, and we're kind of running out of time, so I want to kind of get this. But I'd like to hear from all three of you, kind of briefly, if you can, on the idea of establishing trust. So how does a producer establish trust with a writer day one? And then also, how do you repair trust with a writer if a notes session goes sideways? Owen, you start with you?
Oh, that's a tough one. So I think
yeah, go ahead.
that trust is connected to consistency, right? So again, we're just hovering around relational dynamics, which is I trust the light switch because every time I go over there and flip it, the light comes on.
Sure.
So consistency is the key. I need to know that you are going to be consistent over time. Then I can trust whatever that happens to be. Now, the problem is the second part of your question, which is there's no reliable human method to rebuild trust.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't. If there were, marriage counselors would be out of business. Right? The way in which trust is rebuilt is a long-term commitment to relationship where everybody's being very honest about where they are. And that consistency needs to be reestablished. I can count on you. I can come back again and again and again and know that you are trustworthy. You are worthy of this relationship. You are worthy of my time and efforts. But once trust is broken, now you are on the slow march, and you need to understand that that is going to take time. If you think, hey, it's 2 weeks and I'll rebuild trust with this writer, you're kidding yourself. It is long-term commitment to relationship that rebuilds trust. And the nuance of that is between those two personalities, how they show up for each other.
I think that there's kind of a parallel here, you know, I thought you're talking about, Jimmy, also about, you know, like we can walk differently, you know, having a specific relationship with God, channeling your walk on this planet, something that I'm not sure gets addressed enough in church. And certainly in our business is like actual self-care, like true self-care, because you need to be, I want you to be comfortable with yourself and compassionate on yourself so that you can have that confidence with other people. Like if you trust yourself, you will project a outward trust, you know, and if you break trust and you own it, that's a huge part of it. The humility to know that you're going to mess up, to admit when you've messed up. I sort of see in the Gospels, like Jesus was very good at taking care of himself. Like he, you know, Savior is sometimes a misnomer for him. He was very good at taking time out, making sure that he was in a good place mentally, spiritually, probably even physically. And I can't overstate that for walking through this planet, and especially with artists, as producers dealing with artists, that the greatest gift is to be able to have your own sense of confidence in yourself, confidence in your place, your path, you know, your purpose. I just think people will trust you rightly then because you have some trust in yourself.
That's good. That's good.
Jeez. I mean, those are both great answers. I don't know. I don't have anything new to add. I think it's a really hard process. And I think the more that you know somebody, the better a relationship it becomes. And it probably becomes more of a a true friendship or true collaboration than it does, a working relationship or professional relationship. I think that those are the most fruitful anyway. But, and, like with a friend, sometimes it's as easy as going over with a six pack and saying, I messed up. Let's just talk about it. And sometimes it's as easy or not so easy, and you just give them a lot of space and let them come back when they're ready. So look, I think the hardest thing to do in this business is to be humble, period. And this is not a business that rewards people who leave their egos at the door. Claire, I love what you said earlier about taking the blame. My wife has called me a blame eater. I will just take it and move on, and as often as possible, because I don't really care, who's wrong. I just want to get on the other side of it. And I honestly, I think that there is a level of, I think to be humble and to be a celebrity are probably at odds in a lot of ways. So I think finding people who are embracing, your values and your morals is probably the best basis for any working relationship.
And I would say too that you can have confidence and humility. It doesn't have to be a meekness. It doesn't have to be putting yourself last. You can have confidence, but exhibit a humility of who you are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's really good, you guys. I want to close up our time with this. I want to do a lightning round. Okay, so I want to shift us a little bit. You guys are all so professorial and godly there. So now I want to get back to being silly. All right, so I want to close up. We're going to do a lightning round where I am going to give you some stereotypical bad notes, and I want you to interpret them. Okay, you're going to spin them. You're in a room. Okay, and I want to hear how you're going to interpret this note to make it better, to change it. Okay, so students, you're paying attention. This is how professionals do it. Ready? Here we go. All right, how about this one? Here's the first one. Make it pop. Make it pop.
You need to find something in the script that people will talk about the next day, something surprising. You need to kill off your main character in a weird way.
I like it. Okay. Surprises. Good. Claire, Quinton, anything else?
What's on this page that makes me want to read the next page?
Okay.
There you go.
Good.
Add someone who speaks gibberish.
You made that pop. All right. How about this? Needs more heart.
That's a bad one, because that means that they're not emotionally engaged. So I think that you have to figure out a way to be more true and have a character be sharing their internal thought process and internal arc more clearly in scenes. What they're really saying is they want to cry, and they're not crying.
That's really good. I think it's also going back to Quentin's find the truth in it. And a note that I sometimes give to beginning writers is there should be a scene or two in the script that you are embarrassed when people read, because it reveals something about you.
That's great.
Yeah, I would ask in that situation, I would say, well, let's stop right now. Can you tell me a story that really moves you, something that happened to you? Because I want to hear about something in you that is really moving. And then you take that moment and you make a little jump to what you're working on, because then you hear what moves them. And you just try and get them over the hump and into the fiction part.
Very good. How about this one? And by the way, one of mine was make it funnier, but we've already covered that. So how about this one? Raise the stakes. Raise the stakes. That's so vague. Help me out with that.
I mean, the truth is that you can do that in a lot of different ways, but you want to, if it's a high school comedy, then you want the PA to be on so the whole school can hear the embarrassing speech at the end. If it's an action thing, it's a bomb that'll not just destroy this city, but it'll destroy the entire world if detonated. It's the Infinity Gauntlet versus I don't know, who done it with Thor's dad or something. I don't know. I just broke down that.
Yeah, I mean, I would immediately go to what is the thing that your character loves the most and doesn't want to lose? Do you know what that is? And what is the most embarrassing secret that they hope no one will ever discover? And as soon as you know what those two things are, you understand what stakes are. Right? I have a goal and I have a thing I'm trying to keep hidden. And the closer I get to each one of those, the hotter the script becomes.
That's great. Those are both perfect. And I was going to say, similar to Quinton, it's like double down on your character's wound. What's their core wound? And like the funniest example is Indiana Jones with his snakes. It made the pit more personal. It's like, and but double down on the wound of the character and core them.
All right, so this one, I swear to you, I had this written before Quentin's story, but here we go. Add a car chase here and have them kiss on page 30.
It's a great note.
Yes, I'm like, yes, I can do that.
Yeah,
that's pretty specific.
Yeah, I'm on it. I'm on it.
I love it.
I'll have the pages on your desk by tomorrow morning.
Is it bad to be that to do a little bit of backseat writing, or is it? Do you not? Is that just like?
Well, here's the thing, and again, it goes back to Flash Forward and that joke that we just made fun of, but it wasn't wrong. Which is very often those specific notes are coming from people that know it works where they work. Like if I work at ABC, I know that this is what our audience wants.
Right.
Aren't we all trying to be successful here? So the pieces I can solve for you, I will. Right. So this was my experience there. And also at Netflix, the last show I did for Netflix, they were like, in the first 2 minutes, we need to feel like we've been shot out of a cannon. I don't care how you do it, but I better feel like that in 2 minutes. Because if that's not there, your show's not going on the air. So I'm going to take that note.
Yep, that's great.
All right. So then last two, how about this one? Can the chemistry be better?
Yes. Not my job. Right? Sorry. Chemistry happens between two actors. That's the casting people and the director. That's not my job. Right? I don't do that. I don't have the power. Even as a producer, I can lay in and say who I want or who I think is best for the job, but I don't actually get the thumbs up on that. That comes from a different committee. So I'll give my opinion, but I can't make that happen for you. That's in the hands of some other people. I don't have that lever. That lever is not available to me.
No. Owen, Claire, you guys?
Yeah, I think there is, writing comedy or rom-coms. You're trying to give a hint of chemistry between the two leads. And I find it usually comes down to trying to find two people. You want them to basically have the same worldview, but come at it from opposite places. If they have different worldviews, they're never going to end up together. But if they have the same worldview, the same basic values, but they come at them from different ways, you can be saying the same thing in two different ways all through the script until they're saying the same thing and kissing on page 30 in the car chase. But trying to get some chemistry on the page has to come, in my world, from two people who have the same worldview but see it from opposite gifting, from opposite personalities. I don't know if that made any sense.
No, it did. Yeah.
The only thing I would add to that is that I think we talk about chemistry a lot from a same-sex perspective. Like, can this group feel like friends more? Or like, what are things, like within the show I work on now, it's like in the police precinct, what are the things that make, everybody, like that shared history that can come out, like the copy machine that doesn't work and everybody's like complaining about it and everybody's got a joke about the copy machine, or everybody's making fun of the same person for the same thing. Like those are, things that I mean, I'm not a writer, but I just know that like when I'm reading two people making fun of somebody and that person shows up, then I'm like, well, I know these two are connected and they're also connected to this person, but there's a pecking order.
Right.
It's good. And then here you go. Here's the last one I have for you. I hate, this is an actual note. I hate voiceover.
They listened to the Robert McKee, thing where it's like, or what was that movie with Nicolas Cage? Adaptation. Thank you. God help you if you use voiceover. That is a load of a crock of dung. I don't think, look, I think voiceover is a specific tool that can be used sparingly, for a lot of reasons. And some genres allow it to be used way more than others. But yeah, if they don't like voiceover, then why are you doing a PI show? Like it's going to be baked in, guys. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. I mean, I highly recommend it for those who can go and watch it. The Martin Scorsese documentary that's on Apple right now.
Mm-hmm.
He talks specifically about Goodfellas and the use of voiceover there. So let's go watch Goodfellas with no voiceover. Right? So it is case specific, but are you using voiceover because you've left a lot of stuff out of the script and now you're trying to paste over it? Is really what is underneath so much reluctance around it. So there is a way to do it. You would just have to decide, is this the best time to do it?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like every aspect of filmmaking can be done tropishly or beautifully. I think it's so dumb to say that any kind of aspect of getting your story told in the best way possible to connect with the audience, even if it is pasted on a little bit, if the movie is not working, and so you need, animated movies, holy cow, talk about creating an animated. I've been on 3 that have been like, okay, now we need to do a prologue because nobody's understanding this world. And so in comes the prologue. Once upon a time in this world, there were, it's like, okay, well, make it interesting, because there's no point in saying that's a trope, we're not going to do it, and make the audience just suffer through the film. Like, help the audience out, set up the audience for success. It's like, and do it to the best of your ability, obviously. But I just don't. I think it's crazy to say that any trope can't work if it's done well.
That's great.
100%.
Hey, you guys, this was fantastic, and I must admit, my notes for this panel is 20% could have been better. But other than that, that's my
PDB.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. No, this was fantastic. What a great conversation. All 3 of you, just wonderful insights. I'm really grateful that that each of you would spend time out of your busy schedules to sit with us and to just let us leech off of your wisdom and experience and insight, and just very grateful to all 3 of you. This has been a wonderful time. So, as you guys know, well, actually, maybe Owen, it's been a while for you, but we always pray for our guests before we wrap up. So, Deanne, would you be willing to unmute yourself and say a prayer of blessing for our 3 guests?
In the name of Jesus Christ, Heavenly Father, we thank you for the voices and messages we heard today, and we are grateful for the speakers, Quinton, Clare, and Owen, who shared their wisdom, insight, and experiences with us. Bless them for their time and effort and for communicating with us effectively, and bless us to apply what we learned today. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Deanne.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. God bless you guys. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Get out
guys.
there and do good.
That's right.
Thank you for listening to the Act One podcast. Celebrating over 20 years as the premier training program for Christians in Hollywood, Act One is a Christian community of entertainment industry professionals who train and equip storytellers to create works of truth, goodness, and beauty. The Act One program is a division of Master Media International. To financially support the mission of Act One or to learn more about our programs, visit us online at actoneprogram.com. And to learn more about the work of Master Media, go to mastermedia.com.